Hola amigos, it's Senor He, and I'm not using my own hands again. You're welcome. Today we've got an informational text in front of us, and I want to remind you one way that you might be able to handle and annotate these types of texts. That way that you might remember is MSI. I'll remind you the M stands for main idea when we're looking for the main idea of a section in a text. The S are the supporting details that back up that main idea, support that main idea. The I is simply an inference or our own idea we have after reviewing the text. You'll notice this text is called The Human Brain, something I hope you're at least familiar with. But if you're like me and you're not a scientist, you may not know all the separate parts. Fortunately, the author has included a graphic here. This is something we'll refer back to when the author makes reference to something we don't know about. This graphic will help us with some of the more complicated topics in this text. Starting with the first paragraph, often is an introduction to kind of the topic that we'll be looking at. So I'm just going to read this one as it is. The famous scientist James Watson summarized it this way: the brain boggles the mind. The human brain is truly impressive. It weighs only about 3 pounds, but controls everything a person does, ever has done, and ever will do physically, intellectually, and emotionally. No computer even comes close to having the brain's abilities. The brain controls a person's actions, reactions, and survival functions such as breathing. It also has the ability to think, remember, process information, and learn new things. Now, this didn't tell me a lot that I didn't already know. I know the brain's very important. I know the brain controls a lot of the body's functions. So for this one to the right, I'm just going to annotate for main idea, mainly as a placeholder. So I remember this is where I found this information. And the main idea here is that the brain is very important. To find supporting details that prove my main idea to be true in this section, you really have your choice. We have a list of reasons why the brain is important. For instance, towards the end of the paragraph, second to last sentence, the brain controls a person's actions, reactions, and survival functions such as breathing. My gosh, breathing is pretty important. In this case, since it's just an introduction, the inference that I can make again is the same as the main idea. The brain is pretty vital. You need your brain. Moving on to paragraph 2, the rest of the text, since I've previewed it here, I know it's mainly telling us the different functions the brain performs and then why that's so important to us. So I'm going to treat paragraph 2 and 3 like one chunk here. And I'm going to find the main idea. I'm going to find details that support that main idea and make my own inference after I have a chance to read it. So beginning with paragraph 2, the brain is one part of the central nervous system, the system that controls all of the body's activities. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is protected by the skull, and the spinal cord runs through vertebrae of the back, the bones that make up the spine. The spinal cord transmits messages between the brain and other parts of the body through nerve cells called neurons. If a person decides to pick up a book from the shelf, a voluntary action, the brain sends that message to the arm and the hand through the spinal cord. If a person touches a hot surface and burns his or her hand, an involuntary action, the nerve cells in the hand send a pain message to the brain through the spinal cord. Paragraph 3. A constant stream of messages travels through the neurons in the spinal cord at speeds of more than 150 miles per hour. The human brain never stops working even when a person is asleep. As well as transmitting messages through the spinal cord, neurons transmit messages from one part of the brain to another. There are approximately 85 billion of these cells in the brain alone. Neurons send messages through tiny branch-like structures that connect to other neurons in different parts of the brain, as well as other parts of the body. The points where neurons meet and transmit information to each other are called synapses. Each neuron may be connected to as many as 10,000 other neurons, resulting in more than 100 trillion synapses in a single brain. So that was a lot in paragraphs 2 and 3, but when we try to boil it down and we consider what's the main idea here, we have a lot of evidence that the brain is working together with the spinal cord to send important messages to your body. These things include pain messages. They include messages sent when you pick up a book, you make a voluntary action. We know that these things occur even while we're asleep, up to 150 miles an hour. Those items are more details that support our main idea here. So in paragraph 2 is where we first see that the spinal cord transmit messages between the brain and other parts of the body through nerve cells called neurons. And I think that's a great supporting detail that proves, of course, that our brain is working through our spinal cord to send messages as well. So with all of this information, some of it's old to me, some of it's brand new. When I think about what kind of inference can I make, I think I can pretty safely determine that without the brain, the spinal cord wouldn't be able to get much done. They work together to help us maintain our bodies. So we know, before we read this, we knew the brain was important. The details that have been added here for us just show us just how important it is. There are entire other structures in our body that are controlled by the brain and that work together with the brain on a daily and even second-to-second basis here. Moving on to paragraph 4, and we're almost done here. We have 2 left. Although a person cannot increase the amount of neurons in his or her brain, learning new things increases the number of synapse connections between them. Learning and education actually change the structure of the human brain. That structure changes every time a person learns and every time that person has a new thought or memory. The more a person learns, the more there is to think about. And the more there is to think about, the more there is to remember. As a result, the connections between neurons get stronger and the brain is able to function more effectively. It processes, thinks, analyzes, and stores information more quickly and productively than it did before these connections were made. Neurons are just cells, and everything a person knows is the result of the connections between them. Last paragraph. Scientists have gained a wealth of knowledge about the human brain, but there is a lot they do not yet understand. The neurologist Santiago Ramon y Cajal, for example, compares the brain to a world of unexplored continents with great stretches of unknown territory. Even so, new discoveries continually increase our knowledge of how the brain functions and how people learn. So in paragraph 4, in this chunk here for the rest of the text, when I'm considering the main idea or when I'm considering what it's mostly about, what sticks out to me is that we can actually strengthen our brain. We can strengthen the connections by learning. They put it for us pretty simply. The more you know, the more there is to think about. And then the more you think, the quicker and stronger these connections in your brain are going to get. When these things get quick and strong, you're able to learn things more quickly, analyze things more quickly, remember things more quickly. And so that is the main idea of this section. We've spent the whole text learning how important it is. Now they're finally telling us, my gosh, it's so important. How can we make it better? The details to support this idea are located throughout the paragraph. You could pick almost anything. An inference that you can make from this section is that you have some responsibility in how your brain is or how your brain ends up. You know, you're not just stuck with your brain. You have the opportunity to improve, strengthen those connections in the brain between the neurons and the synapses, and ultimately become smarter. So it seems that just like a muscle in your arm, maybe your bicep, if you work it out, it's going to get stronger. That's what I'm learning from this section as well. You have the ability to strengthen your brain and make those connections. So at this point, we've read the entire text. We've learned that the brain is super important. It communicates with various processes in the body, various other systems, and they work together in a way that actually allows you the ability to strengthen your brain by simply learning new things, practicing new things, and being awake in class. So we've determined from the chunks separate main ideas, but now we need to look at the text holistically. So if we're looking at the text as a whole, and we want to determine a main idea for the entire article, You can use your annotations to help you determine this. You can use what you've learned from the article, of course. So at this point, go ahead and write, the article is mostly about. Be prepared to finish that sentence and for your teacher to come around and give you a little check mark or maybe a little redirection, just in case we're not pulling out the main idea here. After that, you have dissected an informational text about the human brain, something you might know about, you might not, but I bet you do now, and you know how to make it stronger. So one way to do that would probably be to review this video again. Make sure you have all your information down as it's been presented. Make sure you understand what is being talked about. That way you'll understand this article and your connections will get stronger. My gosh. All right, bye.